Welcome to chapter 9 in the AI Evals for Everyone course. So in this chapter, as I discussed earlier, we'll be talking about common misconceptions and this widespread notions of what it takes to build a successful AI product, which are actually quite often debunked because of like their failures to solve certain cases. So firstly, let's talk about some basic foundational misconceptions that you might come across in different places. The first one that we hear often is benchmarks predict my product success. Now, there is a growing understanding that this is not always true, but at the same time, like there is a vast majority of folks who want to pick a model or pick the right architecture for essentially solving based on the benchmarks that the model solves, right? So benchmarks are only describing the ability of the model to perform on a certain set of use cases, which kind of give you a good idea of like when to choose what kind of category of models, but not the exact one. So a lot of additional work needs to be done to define your own benchmarks or your own evaluation data sets or production monitoring or whatever based on your business context. That is extremely important in building these products, and benchmarks alone don't determine which model exactly works best in your use case. And the second foundational misconception is about engineers being able to write evaluations or even just single functionality or single job profile being able to write evaluations. Remember that evaluations or the kind of metrics that you design is essentially going back to first principles methodology, that it defines what your product needs to do, and it defines what are the metrics that you can gather when your product does something unintended. So this is a big branch of things, and it needs collaboration of multiple domain experts and product teams and engineers coming together and sitting assessing what the product needs to do and then coming up with this. So single job profile is not able to like achieve this very effectively. And the third foundational misconception is about evaluation being a one-time setup. As we kept repeating in the previous chapters, evaluation or just the product flywheel that you're talking about is not a one and done process that you define some basic criteria and like everything will keep working. We discussed in the earlier chapters why this is not the case, because user behavior changes. New model gets launched with capabilities, sometimes impacting the previous capabilities, which you need to be careful about. Use cases evolve, like you are no longer restricted to one use case, you want to like expand the product into more use cases. So as the world is changing around you and the product is evolving, evaluation also needs to keep evolving with it, and the production monitoring too. So all of these are extremely important and the right mindset to start off when you're building an AI product. So let's split this up into further misconceptions that you might hear in multiple places. So firstly, in the pre-deployment, and this is all the evaluation stories that you keep hearing about. The first thing that we see teams doing mistakes is about needing comprehensive coverage. You can think of this similar to passing like, unit tests or maintaining code coverage for like 98-99% of the code. While this is maybe desired in some cases, most of the cases this is actually not required, because the ideal scenario is that you kind of have an estimate of what the users might want. And as long as you're passing some meaningful threshold and you're able to go to the users, that is going to teach more, like iterating fast is going to teach more about what your product needs to do, rather than achieving the best score on your evaluation data set. So this is a common misconception that you need to avoid. And the second one is about code metrics aren't sophisticated enough. We all know that LLMs are super capable of like, analyzing complex paragraphs or complex reasoning steps and then arriving at the answer. And you might think that to analyze something so as powerful, I also need something as powerful to judge it, which is basically the point of LLM judges. So there's a spectrum of people who are on the most extreme, that code metrics don't do much, but in a lot of cases, simple code metrics actually give you a lot of information on what are the things that the model's final output needs to provide. So do not ignore them, kind of explore them and understand whether they're relevant for your use case. And most of the times there are at least like one or two metrics that are useful, especially in the offline pre-deployment phase. And on the other extreme of metrics are folks who want to build LLM judges are like everything for everything. So LLM judges are hard to build for multiple reasons, like we discussed in the chapters. But the key idea is you need to invest the right amount of human effort into building an LLM judge once you get confidence that that is extremely important for your product success. If you don't know that, or if there is uncertainty in that, there is always a good middle ground to find where you can actually do some work to find this LLM judges, build this LLM judges, and evaluate a product. And after gaining a reasonable performance, just go to the production and identify and learn more from there. The key reason is this, right? Many of products evolve and they don't get everything right on the first time. So it's more about setting yourself up for those kind of evolution processes and improving over time. And this is the same thing for the detailed criteria as LLM judges. This is more of building LLM judges as best practices, making sure that your LLM judges are focused on like certain aspects of evaluation and not expecting like to build like one judge to rule them all kind of scenario. Now let's talk more about the production phase, which is the phase 2 that we talked about. One key idea that you need to be understanding is that this is very different from pre-deployment phase, where you have time and resources and also the ability to examine things. So in production, this is what you exactly lack, but also you can't completely fly blind and not know what your product is doing. So this is where all the common misconceptions come in, that you need to evaluate every trace in production and don't be like a control freak who needs to understand evaluate each of these conversations. We need to build right metrics and right kind of log filtering in place so that you're flagging the right kind of conversations, and those are the ones we are going back and evaluating. So that's extremely important. And then there's also this idea of because production is extremely high, like the bar needs to be maintained high. I need a lot of metrics to decide whether my product is doing the right thing or not. Sometimes it's useful, but again, this is also back to the first principles discussion, that there aren't many cases where you need like dozens and dozens of metrics. It's always good to start with like 5 to 6 metrics that are showing you what your product is doing from a user behavior, and also like from the conversations behavior, and then work backward from there if you need to add more to identify like a certain category of things. This comes into the new problem discovery phase. And the other things that we need to understand, like whether online is always better. And what we mean by that is there is a scenario where you can get into that, okay, I'm seeing too many problems with my product. I'm going to put as many metrics as I can into the online. I can afford to pay the cost, and then let the model give the best solution to the user, right? It works, especially when your traffic is low, and once your application gets popular and everybody wants to use your app, you really need to understand what to cut down. And it's really hard to identify what to cut down if you haven't built it up incrementally. So that is like a good understanding of like, okay, what do I absolutely need for judging my online product behavior, and then work backward from that so that you can cut down the newer or redundant metrics that were added. And this is another popular misconception that is, I think, probably going on for the last like 1 or 2 months, is this industry divide or a dichotomy of like evals versus A/B testing. If you fundamentally think of these two processes, you are essentially trying to measure whether your product is doing the right thing, or if it's not doing the right thing, is it giving me signals to again improve the product later. So in the evals world, essentially you are doing things which are the pre-deployment phase, where you are understanding whether known patterns are occurring in the real world, and then learning from that. The idea of A/B testing is a typical, not a typical, but like a traditional product testing behavior, where you are kind of serving different modes of the product to different groups of users and identifying whether your production metrics are varying. And if they are varying, then actually you move to the better variant. So what an example of this looks like. For example, if you're building ChatGPT, and you want to test out a new conversational tone with the user. Now, no matter how many evaluations data sets you built, you can only gauge the interest of the people on this new mode based on the number of people you get to talk to, right? So what you can actually do is try out this new prompt on a subsection of users and then see whether their production metrics are improving. Things like if the users with the new prompt are upvoting more frequently, or if they're regenerating the response because they don't like it, or even so as to making sure that if the user stopped using the product or started using the product way more, all of these are signals that you want to capture, and there's no way it could have been tested with evaluation datasets. So this is a false dichotomy that you come across many places, that evals can solve everything or A/B testing can solve everything. What fundamentally we are trying to do as product builders is making sure you're picking the best parts out of these two and focusing on the problem to solve so that you pick the right tool in these cases. I guess we talked about a bunch of these misconceptions, and you might have the question of like, oh, if these misconceptions are so easy to identify, why do they keep persisting? A lot of it is a mixture of the tool marketing that you see and the social media, which kind of amplifies experiences or now, given we talked about a lot of these misconceptions, a simple question can come to mind that, okay, given that these are misconceptions, why do they even like persist and shouldn't they be debunked very quickly? There are multiple factors for why this is the case. Firstly, the AI product building and the space of evaluation and monitoring is extremely new, and the field is increasing in terms of capabilities and the kind of model behavior very frequently, that many things that worked like say 1 year ago are like obsolete now, and we need like a continuously evolving way of doing this. So this kind of leaves a gap where different kinds of marketing, like tool marketing or procedural marketing, like evals or everything kind of things, can come and pitch in as a solution or a one-shot solution for your problems, whereas in reality, like every tool will fall short of it if you're not understanding your problem deep enough. So essentially that is extremely important to making sure that you're focusing on the problem, and again like working backwards from there, given all of these tools in your arsenal and picking up the right one. And also the another side of like issue is that success stories are not well publicized, in the sense that any successful agent that you're seeing out there don't have like a clear understanding of like, this is a practice that we built and this needs to be followed by everybody, because there are like so much work going on in like, domain specific agents and this broad general use agents and then multi-model agents and the deep research agents. Different methodology works for different kinds of products that you're building. So essentially identifying that what worked for your use case and like publicizing that is going to do of more help in like getting rid of these misconceptions. So the right mindset we recommend is to basically start simple and then evolve slowly. And this is a theme that we kept repeating over and over, that the whole point of this course is not that you're going to succeed by just like applying the lessons from here, but you're going to get into the right mindset of what needs to be applied and then like keep repeating the process over and over. Making sure this and another key ingredient of like getting success here is identifying the right context, which means, are you providing your product with the right information, and are you building the right set of artifacts that gather the knowledge across multiple domain experts and plugging them into evaluation data sets or production metrics and things like that. So these are like very important or unsaid factors that contribute to actually building a successful AI product out there. So the key takeaways from this chapter, to summarize, are the benchmarks. And essentially, there are like a lot of benchmarks for different use cases. They should act as a guiding path, but not the ultimate decider in choosing the model to use or like what kind of product to adopt to. And simple often like, wins, in the sense that because this field is new and because the product that you're building is new and your customers are going to interact with unexpected ways, kind of believe more in the process of iteration rather than getting it right in the first shot. And combine this with preparing for evolution is really important, because you are only learning or building the best product out there as you are learning from your customers. And only when you have this right set of constructs in place, you can actually gain advantage by being out there for most of the time. So this is the end of the chapter, and we recommend going back to our course on the website and reading through the glossary, so that if there are any terms that you're actually missing or like not getting the right context, you can keep a tab open on the side and then use that as a reference as we are talking about different things. Like for example, production monitoring and what is A/B testing. All of them, reading them from the first principles is useful in identifying the context in which we are discussing that, and then like, gaining this knowledge better.